Hi everyone, and welcome to our Spotlight on Financial Services Fireside Chat. I'm Euan Wilson, I'm an account manager here at AWS, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Stuart Ellidge, who's the CTO from Oxbury Bank. Today we're going to be talking through a little bit about the Oxbury story, the great work you're doing within the UK agricultural sector, and also hopefully a little bit about how you're using AWS along with that. Before we dive in, Stuart, do you want to do an introduction to yourself and tell us a little bit about Oxbury?
Thanks, Euan. So, I'm Stuart Ellidge. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Oxbury Bank. Been with the company since its founding in 2018. We are proud to say that we're the UK's only farming and farming supply chain specialist bank. What that means in practice is that since we launched as a fully regulated bank in 2021, we've lent money to over 3,500 farmers, and that lending is all underpinned by the 40-odd thousand savings customers who trust us to look after their money. We've built our own systems, so that means we own our own core banking platform, we build the user interfaces, we've built the mobile app, and all of that is entirely cloud native, and obviously the cloud that we've chosen is AWS. We were really pleased to announce that we had our first fully profitable year in 2023, and 2024 is set to be even better.
Great. I love it as a concept. I think it's a really interesting idea. But could you tell us a little bit more about Oxbury and how it started? What was the inspiration for the bank?
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually, for inspiration, we almost need to go right the way back to 2008 and the global financial crisis. Up to that point, most of the major banks had specialist working capital facilities for farming that recognised that cash flow is really seasonal. You've got an awful lot of outgoings at the beginning of the season before you kind of get to harvest, and you can start to make some money back at the end of the season. And these facilities, kind of the way that they worked was pretty straightforward. Effectively, a farmer would buy something, get the invoice and send that off to the bank, and then someone at the bank would be checking it, reviewing data entry, kind of keying it in onto the systems and then arranging payment. Now, hit GFC and everyone's looking to cut costs, tighten their belts. But unfortunately, a lot of these facilities were really quite expensive to run. They were on aging platforms, they were very manual, and so within about 18 months, more or less they disappeared from the market. But the need for working capital hadn't, so it had to be fulfilled somewhere. You fast forward to around about 2017, 2018, when Oxbury comes into view, and what's happened? Well, increasingly what's happened is that a lot of that debt that would have been on working capital facilities is actually being pushed into the supply chain. So you've got the manufacturers and distributors who sell to farms offering extended payment terms. And if you talk to the big guys, the bigger players, you'll find that they've got multiple millions of pounds effectively in extended payment terms. And it's into that a fortuitous train journey happens, and effectively our MD and CEO were two guys who had actually started out at the Bank of Scotland, I think on the same day as part of the same graduate intake, and they bumped into each other on a train journey. Now, James had kind of stayed in banking all the way through, and he'd actually ended up as Clearbank's founding CEO and had kind of finished there as that handed over into operational work. And Nick, who's the MD, he'd stayed in banking till the early 2000s, and then he'd gone off and built an agritech company, which he'd subsequently sold to Relex. And so you get to this train journey with these two guys who've not seen each other for years. One has previously built a bank, the other one has just sold an agritech company, and they're both at loose ends and working out what to do. And it's at the end of the train journey, they'd worked out they could pool their banking, agriculture and technical expertise to build a new bank designed to solve that problem of excess debt in the supply chain. That's kind of where the Oxbury story starts.
Yeah, no, amazing. And I guess you mentioned you've also been there since the start. I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in that time. Could you talk us through a little bit about the growth that the business has gone through and challenges? What have you encountered during that time?
There have been a few. It's an interesting journey building a bank. I think someone once said to me, basically a fellow CTO of another challenger bank, that if you knew what you got to do at the beginning, you maybe wouldn't start the journey. But we kind of didn't. I think the first thing to say is that the FCA and the PRA do have really high barriers to entry. You've got to work really hard to get to a point where they will approve you to even start that journey. And so right at the beginning, I think the work on the regulatory business plan took a heck of a lot of intellectual, emotional, and just pure effort really to get to a point where we got something we were really comfortable with and confident. Capital raising has been a challenge. Or at least kind of was, and the reason being that 2008 when we started, we felt it would be easy to attract capital into a bank. Of course, the problem is we entered mobilisation in 2020 just as COVID was about to hit, and basically at that point, unless you were Zoom, no one was throwing capital at anybody. So we've had to work hard, I think, for that, and in a way that's helped us to be that focused business because we've looked to be very capital efficient all the way through. But you've clearly got to hold reserve. So I think from a business perspective, some of the challenges were in there, and we've coped with those very well. I think in terms of some of the changes, other than Exco at the beginning, we were an entirely IT-led business, as you kind of might expect. So going from a small office, small office where each morning when we turned up we didn't know what the actual office was going to be, because to save money we were on a you sit where we've got space kind of deal. Purely IT led thing to actually turning that into a company now with over 200 employees across operations, relationship management, credit and risk, and so on. It's been great to see, and I think from a gainer growth perspective, maybe one of the challenges we had was trying to work out what was the right stuff to build, whereas what was the stuff that we should buy, where should we look for partners. And I think we've done really well with that. I think I'll first off just mention a good friend of mine, Eric Bogarts, who had a fledgling company who built a core banking platform. And we ended up partnering with them, and they were very aligned to making sure that we were in a good place and ready to launch, and so aligned and so committed that eventually we acquired the company. We liked it well, so that's worked out great. But we've also had really effective partnerships in security, credit bureaus, open banking, and of course cloud services. Yeah,
I guess on that note, talking about your kind of early journey and then choosing AWS as your chosen provider. What drove that decision? What were the things you liked about AWS that helped you make that decision?
So I think first of all, it's fair to just acknowledge that in previous roles with a couple of different FTSE Top 100 companies, I'd had good experiences with AWS. So there's an interest there to begin with. But actually, I think the first thing that was a really key decision point for us was that we always wanted to be to run a lean operation effectively, and we still do now. IT is not expanded, or mushroomed into a huge organisation. And so for us, one of the key decisions was making sure that we took full advantage of what I would call cloud native services. We weren't just looking to run VMs in the cloud and manage everything ourselves. We know the shared responsibility model and how that works, and we wanted to put as much of the responsibility on the provider's shoulders. If I again look back to 2018 and decision points, one of the easy examples to point to was Fargate. We wanted to go for a fully containerized architecture. Most of the other offerings were around Kubernetes, which is great technology, but comes with a reasonable amount of maintenance and overhead. Whereas Fargate, we just know we can define our tasks, set the service up, and it kind of takes care of itself. And that was a real plus point for us. It allows us to do an awful lot with quite a minimal, right-sized team is what we would call it. And the same would be true for Aurora on the RDS side of things. So that whole idea of being able to do more with less was an area where we think that AWS excels. I'd worked with AWS previously, but I'd never built an entire organisation from ground zero, and nor had any of the people that I was working with. So I trotted along to the Financial Services Symposium in probably late 2018, early 2019, and had a few conversations, explained what it was that we were trying to do, and came away from that with a dedicated account manager and access to your solutions architects. Looking back at that point, I think that we had a good story to tell. We'd got a business case that made sense, but the funding we hadn't got 5 years worth of trajectory. The funding we had was the wrong funding to qualify for the incubator programs and all of that stuff. So actually, it was kind of a little bit of a gamble both ways, and I really like that. And we've had no more than, well, in fact, not say no more. We've had 3 account managers in the 6 years that we've been running. So we've had that continuity. We've had access to really great solutions architects who are able to validate our approaches as we go. And we valued, I think, that little bit of extra engagement that we were able to get that maybe some of the other vendors we were speaking to just weren't really ready for.
Yeah, and as your current AWS account manager, that's really great to hear. I'd kind of like to pivot, I guess, back to the agricultural piece and the work you're doing to support UK farming. Yeah. We're sat in Amazon Studios, and obviously there's Clarkson's farm, and there's a number of different series that are going on at the moment, which are kind of drawing visibility and raising the profile of UK farming. And something else that a few of my other customers are kind of starting to talk about is, I guess, the idea of kind of banking for good and what financial services companies should be doing within improving the world. So I guess it'd be good to hear from you. Is there any particular stories or anything that Oxbury are particularly proud of in that space of the UK farming sector?
Yeah, I mean, UK farming obviously is in our DNA, and we're committed to it. And there's loads, to be honest, that we're proud of. But I'll maybe touch on one that I think everybody could kind of understand. So you mentioned Clarkson's farm, which, by the way, I'm a big fan of, actually. Yeah, it's great. Jeremy is an atypical farmer in many respects. But there's one thing that he is absolutely nailed on, prime example of, and that is that he is a late middle-aged bloke. Farming has not been great at bringing young people into it and enabling young people to stay in it, I think is the key thing. Particularly if what we're looking for them to do is to actually start up their own businesses. We want to know that UK farming has succession built in. So one of the things that Oxbury's done is we've introduced our New Gen programme. And New Gen is basically we've committed 5% of our lending book is available to support new entrants aged between 20 and 40 into the market. And importantly, it's not just funding, but we actually look to provide commercial expertise, so that can be agricultural consultancy, or financial consultancy along the way to help them really, kind of make a great start. Now, I will at this point plug our social media outlets, so LinkedIn, Instagram. Please, I encourage people to. I should look at camera at this point. I encourage you to have a look at those things. Our marketing company as a team would like you to see it. But importantly, we've got some really great stories there of what the New Gen kind of entrance customers have been able to achieve. And if you only watch one, I'd probably say have a look at Devon and Somerset Eggs. Great young couple. Anna and Callum, who are aged mid-20s, so young people. They'd got the opportunity to build a new egg venture. They've got the skills, they've got the passion, they've got the work ethic, they've got everything that they needed, but the funding literally is not available to people like that in the market to get this up and running, because it isn't cheap to start an agricultural venture. Yeah. There's a lot, whether it's equipment, whether it's land costs. There's lots to go at, and so they pitched for New Gen. And we liked them, we liked the story, and we've been working with them since 2023. So we started off by working on that business plan together, and eventually providing the funding. And they've then taken that, and this is all on them. They've absolutely nailed it. Their business is growing. It's ahead of plan, and this is a real business, not a hobby. It's absolutely contributing to the UK's self-sufficiency, which was something we really need. We've got I suppose I'll call it unstable times geopolitically, and the more people like this that we've got who are determined to make a difference and join farming, the better as far as we're concerned. So that's a great success story.
Yeah, amazing.
And I think on the other side, I'll just probably mention some of the work that we are doing around climate. On the one hand, there's no denying that agriculture is a big contributor to the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. It's about 10%. But on the flip side, agriculture has also got a massive opportunity to be a contributor to solving the issue. So particularly, I would say, in terms of regenerative farming, which Jeremy's quite big on at the moment, and also the sequestration of soil organic carbon. So that's basically storing carbon in the soil. And we've done some fascinating work kind of correlating the data between satellite feeds and actually on-farm spectroscopy surveys to understand not only how much soil organic carbon there is, but actually what the potential of that land could be, and helping to work with those farmers to take them on a journey. That's very much where we're going. We view it as a journey with our customers. Many of them have got 20-year loans with us, so we want to be on that journey and make sure that we're going with it. And finally, in terms of just to tie that together, we're really proud to say we are the UK's first bank to issue a natural capital report that's aligned not only to the TCFD but also the TNFD standards. So we're in a great place there.
Yeah, amazing, and that's a topic that's pretty prevalent across all the conversations I'm having. Lots of my customers, that ESG sort of conversation. I guess it'd be interesting to see where that journey goes, and I guess on that, what's next, both for Oxbury and in terms of your AWS journey as well. What does the future hold?
The future's really exciting. I think first of all, we've just got to acknowledge that we only launched the UK bank in 2021. We've barely scratched the surface of what we want to achieve here. We're constantly looking at new and innovative products. We're looking to evolve what we've already got. There's a whole journey in the UK that we want to kind of keep going on and complete. However, it's also worth saying that a lot of the stuff that we're doing in the UK is actually applicable in other territories, and we're in discussions at the moment with people in other geographies about licensing the platform that we've built on a SaaS basis. So that's really exciting for me personally. I think that from a technology perspective, it's validation of what we've built to see it having legs. We're also really keen on our data projects. AWS has been great there. We're making full use of the platform and the tools available to us, and we're looking very closely at how we can use kind of sales data to help the supply chain from a manufacturing and a distribution perspective understand how it can incentivize kind of their profitability and build tighter relationships with their customers. So that's very exciting, and obviously I've already talked about climate, and the data that's available there is just beginning to mushroom, and we're looking to pick and choose, I think, is the key thing, because it's one of those, you could be like a kid in a sweet shop, and it's not about grabbing everything. It's about grabbing the data that makes most sense and that we can then help to work with our customers on, so we can understand where we're going. And then all that talk about data naturally really brings us around to AI and Gen AI. And again, very exciting. We've now committed to building out our first AI team, and we're looking at a number of opportunities there, whether it's for colleague and customer enablement, developer productivity. Everyone's talking about that's low-hanging fruit, but actually we found some really useful stuff, and it's been very effective in terms of data cleansing and data transformation. There's actually surprising use cases in those areas. So I would say in this whole area we've kind of dipped our toes in the water, but we're getting ready to take the plunge.
Amazing. And I think that's maybe a brilliant place to finish on. I want to say massive thank you for you joining us. Really interested to see where the story goes, and it'd be great to have you back in maybe in a year's time and see just how far Oxbury's gone. For anyone listening or watching, if there's any questions you have about AWS or about Oxbury Bank, then please feel free to reach out to myself or Stuart. Do follow Oxbury on LinkedIn. I always see some great content, so a really great one to follow there. And then once again, massive thank you for coming in today and telling your story.
No problem. Thanks for having me.